Hi, welcome back to this week's episode of Personal Selling. Today we'll dive into what I promised you, which is actually nothing, silence. And we will discuss why it's so powerful to master this silence and why it's not so easy for people to enjoy silence. And if you're curious about that, then stay tuned because this is really where we'll focus today. And I don't know about you, because actually I don't know whether you are looking at this now, whether you're listening to what I'm saying, and whether you are actually being silent right now or you are having a discussion with yourself. Because I think the first thing you want to be able to silence is your own brain. And again, when you have this inner silence, now you will be able to be present on the outside, where you can actually listen to what I'm telling you, instead of discussing with yourself what I discussed with you 10, 15, 20 seconds ago. So again, silence is not only what we experience on the outside, it's also this capability of mastering the silence on the inside. I think when you can show up having this meeting with a customer where you're really able to just being silent on the inside, you will be able to actually utilize your acuity. You will be able to see, you will be able to hear much more clearly, much more without any filters, what the other person is actually telling you, showing you. So for me, that's one aspect of being quiet. Where we will focus today is the quietness you can actually hear in the interaction when you interact with other people, and why that can be extremely powerful. In my life, there have been a lot of situations where silence was actually what made the whole shift in the conversation. And again here, like most people, I'm not born with this capability of enjoying silence. But what really helped me to become much better at actually valuing silence was when I was introduced to NLP around 30 years ago. Because what NLP taught me was this whole idea about calibrating, tracking, and adumbrating other people's nonverbal signs. So before those days, I was mainly focusing on the verbal part of the communication. So I asked questions, I listened, and I felt that if there was no words, we were wasting our time. But again, what I understand now is that when I ask a question, I'm paying attention to how the other person is actually moving, what signals they are sending. And to give you a specific example of what I'm looking for is that if I ask a question to a person and say, wow, where do you see yourself 3 years from now? And they do this. As long as they're looking up there, I know it's time for me to be quiet because they're processing my question. And if I start to speak to them while they're looking up here, I'm basically interrupting them getting to the answer I just asked for. So again there, knowing how to basically see whether the person is thinking, processing your question, allowed it for me to be much more easy to be quiet because I knew that, wow, it's not that nothing is happening. I think what's happening right now is actually what I most want to see happening. The customer reflecting on my question, finding an answer. But I'm also able, by noticing where the person is looking, to actually see if they are going to the right location to find an answer. Because if the person is what we in NLP call normal wired, and I ask them, so, wow, where would you like to see yourself 3 years from now? And they go here. I will know that they are now going into some past memories. And it doesn't have to be wrong. It could be that they maybe want to recollect something which was true of them 3 years ago. And that's actually what they want to also see in the future. But it could also be that they are going somewhere very different where they and I don't want them to go. And now maybe it's time to interrupt. But again here, the whole point is that knowing how to also access some of these nonverbal cues made it much more easy for me to not always talk and talk and talk, not to always fill the silence. Because sometimes silence just gives space for people to actually think and reflect. But this is not easy, because a lot of people, they get anxious if there's nobody talking, if there's silence. So you could ask yourself, so what is it that you really need to master to master silence? The question I often get is that, but how do I become comfortable with silence? And I think, again, for some of you, you just need to practice it. You need to start with maybe just 2 minutes a day. 2 minutes of silence, 2 minutes of no mobile phone, no YouTube, no social media, no nothing. And you can do that in the morning when you get up. Maybe you can go, remove the curtains, just see the sunrise. And then take 2 minutes of silence. And then after a few days, you realize, wow, this is not dangerous. I'm not dying because there's silence. And then maybe you can turn it up to 3 or 4 minutes. You can also then start to bring it into a conversation. And I think I heard about a company that start all their meetings with 2 minutes of silence. And they have seen enormous productivity increase in those meetings. So, because again, what happens in most businesses is that people, they're fully packed with meetings back to back all day. So people are running in and out of meetings, and sometimes they don't even know what meeting they're in because they just lost track. But if you allow yourself and your colleagues to just start the meeting, maybe you could say, wow, thank you for showing up here. The purpose of this meeting today is to discuss the plans of activities for the next 3 months. But before we move into the first point of the agenda, let's take 2 minutes to just be silent, and then you can reflect on what is it that you want to contribute with in this meeting. And I will promise you, you will get better meetings. And maybe even you could do these small resets in between the points on the agenda. For most people, this will be awkward because they will have this sense that, oh, we are wasting time. What I promise you is that when you actually have the discussion, it will be much more qualified because people have had a time to reflect, digest, before they just rush in to the next meeting, the next discussion. I think where you can also really benefit from silence is when you're in a negotiation with the customer. And then where the customer says, wow, that price is too high. And then stay silent. And again, here you will see interesting thing happens because sometimes the customer says, oh, yeah, at least come too high to come to what we normally pay. And then again, offer some silence. Maybe even add a small, so too high to what you normally pay. Yes, and now they will go back into talking. And while they're talking, they will start to give away some very useful information, which will help you understand if your price is actually too high, or they just feel compelled to try to see if they could push the prices down. But if you there don't allow yourself to take a pause and stay quiet, you're basically sending a signal that you're not really secure, that you don't trust your own price. And then you're basically what we call, with a technical term, fucked. So being able to just stay relaxed and okay will give you much more leverage in a negotiation. I think all of you already know this. So again here, how do you actually practice this in your day-to-day work? And I think it all comes back to you knowing how to enjoy silence, knowing how to enjoy yourself when you're just being observant and relaxed. Because if you know how to relax yourself in a meeting, it will be much more easy to stay silent at the right times. Sometimes we also talk about this idea about active waiting. And what I mean about this is that not just waiting randomly, but waiting until it makes sense for you to talk again. Knowing what to wait for is extremely powerful. Because this means that you will be able to actually talk when what you have to say will have the biggest impact. A lot of people are talking and talking and talking before the other person is actually ready to hear what they have to say. And that means they're basically wasting their chance to get through to that other person. But knowing how to use silence strategically or in a more intelligent way will allow you to be much more heard by the other person. So this is really what I would like you to take from this episode today, is that sometimes less is more. Sometimes a quiet moment can be very noiseful. And the more you allow yourself to play with this, the more you will improve your skills in communication. So, until next week, just don't leave any comments here. Maybe just leave an empty space, some quietness. So when we meet next time, you will already have some ideas about how you have already used it to your benefit in creating much better meetings with your customers. So thank you for watching this episode.